Good morning, everyone. How are you? And welcome back. Thank you for joining us today for part two of the Mastering the State Contracting Game webinar series, part of our Leveraging Diversity in Technology Procurement Educational Initiative, hosted by the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology's Office of Supplier Diversity in collaboration with the IT Procurement Office. In part two, we focused on formal invitations for bid and what it takes to submit a compliant, competitive response. Today, we're shifting our attention to a procurement path that moves faster, looks different, and often creates a real entry point for vendors, especially small, emerging, and BEP certified firms. Today's session, Small Purchase, Big Opportunity, is all about informal solicitations under $100,000. These opportunities don't come with long timelines or complex submissions, but that doesn't mean that they're easy. Success here depends on speed, visibility, and preparation. Think of small purchases like agile development sprints, shorter timelines, fewer steps, and very little room for rework. You're not monitoring the system and ready to respond. The opportunity can pass before you even realize it existed. Today's session will cover what qualifies as a small purchase and who's eligible to respond, how informal solicitations are issued and evaluated, common timing challenges and how to stay ready, and practical tips for monitoring BidBuy so you don't miss fast-moving opportunities. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Chris Brinkmeyer, the Agency Procurement Officer at the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology. Chris brings deep expertise in state procurement and plays a key role in ensuring compliance, transparency, and efficiency in its purchasing process. Today, he'll walk us through how informal solicitations really work and how vendors can successfully position themselves to compete. Chris, the floor is yours, sir.
All right. Thanks, Reggie. Good morning, everyone. As Reggie said, welcome to our next edition of Mastering the State Contracting Game, our five-part webinar. We'll be covering small purchases in this one. So much like the last one that we did, cracking the code on invitations for bids, we'll be using more of a live demo format, looking at responding to a small purchase, discussing some of the different things you may see on a small purchase versus a formal solicitation, such as an invitation for bid, some different programs that are required due to being a small purchase. And then if we have enough time today, we're going to quickly cover requesting the bid amounts on invitation for bids after the award. We had some questions about that on the last webinar, so I just want to make sure we get something out taped and on video. And then in one of the three remaining webinars that we have covering the request for proposal, we'll go in depth on the vendor debriefing process. However, before getting into all of that, I thought it was prudent that we get the housekeeping stuff out of the way and cover a few things on what a small purchase is and how they're utilized in the state of Illinois. So I'm not going to read through the slideshow because no one wants to do that. So for quick and easy reference, here's the codes that require the state to use small purchases as a purchase method. A small purchase means that the value of the procurement is under $100,000. If this is a term period, it means the value of a 12-month term period is under $100,000. If it's an hourly rate, time and material, it means the contract cannot exceed $100,000. And if bids come in at over $100,000, that kind of stops us from using this procurement method, and we would have to go back out. So we can go on to the next one. I don't want to get too far into that. But the important thing to know on a small purchase right away, small purchases under the CPO General Services Office for the state of Illinois has a small business set-aside program. So that means purchases under $100,000 that are already not on a contract has to be solicited to small businesses first. So in order to be considered a small business in the state of Illinois, you got to have a couple things, and apparently I can't type. Vendors must be registered with the Illinois Procurement Gateway. We went over IPG registration at the very first webinar series we did back in September. Not only being registered in there, but also being registered as a small business in there to be eligible to bid on small business set-aside bids. And with that program, there comes thresholds, right? Like any program, such as BEP, small business has its own thresholds. So quickly, no wholesale business can exceed 13 million in annual sales. No retail business can exceed 8 million in annual sales and receipts. No construction business can exceed 14 million in annual sales and receipts, and no manufacturing business can have more than 250 employees. So if you qualify for the small business set-aside program, it is a great way to get your foot in the door in state contracting, especially if it's not something you've done before. And if you are a business enterprise vendor, it's also important to register as a small business if you qualify. That doubles the opportunities that you're going to have for different solicitations. And not only are small purchases set aside for these small business vendors, there are a list of NIGP codes here that all solicitations, if that NIGP code you use goes to small vendors first. There's not really many that here at Do It necessarily that we would use, but there are a lot of other agencies out there that do procurements that would have one of these NIGP codes that would automatically go to a small business, whether it's a small purchase, an IFB, or even an RFP for some reason if it had that NIGP code. That list can be found, I tagged a link in the PDF here, but that list can also be found on the Chief Procurement Office's General Services site. They have a small business set-aside program tab at the bottom of their page. We're going to quickly look at that page later when we talk about additional resources, so I'll show you where that's at, but that link is there. Well, let's get into the main part, right? Let's get into actually doing a small purchase and looking at the things that you're going to see as a vendor when you come into the thing. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we are going to jump into BidBuy. We covered BidBuy last time, but for those of you that may not have been there, BidBuy is the state's e-procurement system. So any solicitation that the state puts out is going to be found in this system. So what I did is created a bid, right? So as a vendor, you're going to register under NIGP codes. So whether you're registered in the small business for certain NIGP codes, or you're just registered in BidBuy for every NIGP code that you think you can provide value to the state in, it's very important to do so and register for all those, because this is where you're getting your notifications, whether it's a IFB, RFP, small purchase, or whatever the solicitation method may be. So Reggie mentioned at the beginning that small purchases move very fast, and that's true. So if you're not registered in the NIGP codes and not getting notifications, there's a very good chance that you'll miss the opportunity to be able to bid on a small purchase. Small purchases don't have a required posting period like a formal solicitation. So by Illinois Procurement Code, an invitation for bid must be posted to the public for 14 days. An RFP must be posted to the public for 14 days. There is no such thing for a small purchase. A lot of times you're looking at a 3 to 5 day minimum posting period. So it could be up for 3 days, 72 hours and gone. And if you're not paying attention or looking for it, it's not going to be there any longer. The small purchase method, is there to move quick. It's to move agile. It's to move for things of lower value. So we're going to jump in here. So in theory, you would get a notification that the state's looking for a specific product that you're registered under that NIGP code for. The $100,000 threshold is what would give you notification of it being a small purchase. Since I'm not getting notifications here, we're just going to go in and search for a bid that I created in our train environment. It helps if I go into the right train environment and not the production environment. Very important. There we go. So I created a solicitation in the trade environment. You would get notification via email or through browsing the available solicitations. For browsing available solicitations, you can go to the advanced search area here. You can select that you're looking for a bid solicitation. You can pick who you want to look at. If you want to look at Do It, you can pick departments you want to look at. You can pick an IGP code you're interested in. So if you're interested in art objects, or if you're interested in automobiles, barrels, whatever it may be, the list of NIGP codes is very extensive. You see there's 998 major class codes, along with hundreds of class codes, minor class codes under each of those. Or the other thing you can do is come in here and search by type code. So if you want to come in here and search for small purchases, because that's what you're interested in, getting your foot in the door, you can search small purchases for the state, and it would come and bring up every small purchase available that's currently out. And you can see what the bid opening date on there is to make sure that it's still available. So this system goes all the way back. It keeps a historical reference so you can look at these things. What you would be looking for is the bid opening date here in this column. So if the bid opening date has not passed, that means that there is a solicitation available for you to bid on. The one that I created just happens to be in the theme of our squirrel wrangling database from our IFB webinar last month, and we're looking for smart squirrel traps. Not even sure if that's a thing, but let's hope so. So if you were getting notification, you would be able to click right on this link as a bidder. It would take you to this page if you are not logged in. This page is going to have basic information, right? It's going to have, here's the bid number you're bidding on. Here's the quick description of what the state's asking for. So we're asking for smart squirrel traps. Here's the date you have to have your bid in by for it to be viable. Late bids are not accepted. So if you exceed that bid date, we will not consider your bid. It'll have the purchaser, what agency's doing it. Fiscal year don't matter to you. It will have the type code. So it's going to tell you if it's a small purchase, or if it's an invitation for bid, or if it's an RFP, or any of those other procurement methods. The available date here is the day that it's available for the public to view the posting. So it comes in very important when you're talking invitation for bid or RFP, because by law, the state has to give you 14 days to view that posting. Small purchase, you won't see such hard and fast dates because there is no law required on the time of posting. Bid type tells you it's an open bid. That means anyone can bid on it. And then being a small purchase, this is what makes it an informal bid. So that means it is not subject to the competitive procurement methods under procurement code. Next section here, it's a bullet description, a little more in depth of what the agency's looking for. Still not super in depth. It's just made for a quick search. So in this case, we're saying the agency seeking a vendor to supply smart squirrel trap systems designed for humane, efficient, and technology-driven wildlife management. For those of you at the last session, that goes hand in hand with our database that we covered for the invitation for bid. Down here is going to be your ship to and bill to addresses. That will change based on the agency procuring the item, or if the agency has a warehouse, or if they need to go to a specific spot. And then here's where the important attachments start coming in. So now we're looking at the file attachments. So there's two things you can do on a small purchase. Two good places to start. You have your item information here, and then you have your file attachments here. So item information is going to be what we're looking for, right? So if you look at item 1, smart squirrel traps. Looking at item 2, we're looking for on-site training at 126 Cont Street, Bikini Bottom, Pacific Ocean. Item number 3, we need shipping costs for the traps. Doesn't really give you a whole lot of information. But being a small purchase, you have to bid based on price. So that means we don't have the information in the item, so we need to go look at the documents. The way I set this up is I pulled multiple types of documents that you're likely to see, depending on agency or even what they're buying. On a small purchase, there is no set document that is required on a small purchase like there is on an invitation for bid or an RFP. So this is, another reason it's informal. Nothing is formalized, so you may see a different documents. So what I tried to do is pull up several different versions of things that you may see, so we can look through those. So we'll just go ahead and jump in and pull the first one up. It's going to make me download them all, even though I have them. So when you click on the document, it's automatically going to make you download. So the first of the documents that I threw together, this is called a request for quote document. It's pretty much a basic document with what the agency's asking for. Being a small purchase, there is something that's very similar to an invitation for bid. You need to base your bids or your quotes on exactly what we asked for, because you do not get any bonus points for having something better than what's in the specifications. If you say, well, my trap design is a 19 by 20 by 10, and we're going to charge you an extra $500 because our trap's better. But the next person that bids to the specifications and they bid $400, well, they're going to win it, even if you think your trap was better because it was larger, because that's not what we asked for. So it's very important to bid to the specifications or the closest to the specifications as you can. So this one says a minimum, and specifications are important, right? So this one says a minimum of 18 inches long, 10 inches wide, and 10 inches in height. So being it says minimum, that means you can exceed that. If the dimensions on a small purchase said it must be an 18 by 10 by 10, you cannot exceed that. Your quote will be thrown out. So it's important to read exactly what they're asking for in these. So this is a quick, easy document. The agency soliciting vendors to provide a smart squirrel trap system designed for the humane, efficient, technology-driven wildlife management. The awarded vendor is going to have to supply, deliver, and provide initial setup and training for the specified equipment. Scope of work is the contractor is going to furnish smart squirrel traps that meet or exceed the following expectations. So trap design. So since, again, we use the word minimum here, this is the smallest trap that you can provide. You can provide a larger trap, but back to the point, the lowest cost is still going to win. So if it says minimum and you provide a trap double the size with double the cost, someone can cut the cost by providing exactly the size that's asked for at the minimum. There's a good chance they're going to win. Material. So they give you an option of materials here, right? Weather resistant stainless steel or a composite polymer. So it can be either or, but it must be one of those, because they didn't say or similar or anything like that. If they asked for one or the other, it must be one or the other. And again, it's going to come back to lowest cost. And then weight, not to exceed 12 pounds per unit. So if your unit that you offer up is 11.1 pounds, great. If you offer up a unit that's 12.1 pounds, technically the state has to disqualify your bid or not look at your quote. Same with smart features, we got sense, so they're asking for sensor technology. They want motion and thermal detection for accurate squirrel identification. They want AI-based species recognition. They want connectivity, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. They want a mobile app. They want to be able to arm and disarm the traps remotely and have real-time notifications. They want automated doors with non-lethal containment for 24 hours. Getting a Val, can you still see my screen? I just saw a message come through saying someone couldn't see the screen. Okay, perfect.
We can, you may want to zoom in on that a little bit, everyone. If everyone looks at the top of the screen, right underneath the pictures, you'll see where you can zoom in and zoom out on your picture. There you go. That looks a little bit better there. Chris,
Awesome.
I think you zoomed in on it. Yep.
Perfect. So to make sure if I kept talking. And if you see questions coming out, feel free to interrupt me if it's viable to where we're at. So they want humane capture and release. They want a power and battery. That's a rechargeable lithium-ion battery with a 72-hour runtime. And they want a solar charging capability. They want data analytics, capture logs, dashboards. being that this is a small purchase, you have to be able to provide each of these things that they ask for. The first thing they're going to do when they receive your quotes for these items is ensure that the item that you quoted checks each of these boxes. If they do not check these boxes, your quote wouldn't be considered, and we would have to go on to the next vendor. They tell you in this very informal document, they need 50 units. They need delivery and setup. They say delivery within 60 days of the contract execution and on-site setup and training for staff. And they have warranty and support. So you can see this is a very informal document. And it might look different for every procurement, every agency, each buyer in a separate agency. So the bounds on small purchases are very, very loose. Then you might have some agencies that formalize their procurements to make them all look more similar. So they can use that informal document. Or they have two other options that we will cover here as soon as it loads. They can use a contract document. So this is a IT contract from the Department of Information Technology. This is our contract template, right? We're going to have a two-party signed agreement at some point. So it could be this contract document. It could be the third document that I'm going to show you. It could be a PO printout straight out of BidBuy. But there has to be a two-party signed document at some point. So a state may vote for using an actual contract document. That way it is a nice uniform document. This is going to look similar or exactly the same as what we covered in the IFB. You know, your top pages is your general information. You're going to have your signature page here. Page 3 is agency use. That's for us to file with the Illinois Office of the Comptroller to get you paid. And then after that, they would get into your descriptions of supplies. So this is going to look exactly, it's going to have the same description of supplies as that informal document that we had. It's just in a more formalized, standardized manner. So it still has the goal section saying this is what we're looking for. It still has the same technical specifications and all the features. You'll see that they're kind of in specific sections now. So section 1.2 has all the features and supplies and services. And then in milestones and deliverables, it's got the warranty support and the on-site training. So, you know, now it says the vendor shall provide on-site training within 30 days of delivery for a period of 5 hours to all applicable agency staff. Date and time shall be coordinated with the agency. There is no vendor and staff specifications on this one. And then you'll see that they laid out delivery terms much clearer and better in a contract like this. Same as an invitation for bid, since this is a small purchase, there cannot be any red lines or changes to the specifications or to the milestones and deliverables or to the delivery. It's either you agree or you don't. If you don't, your bid's probably not going to be looked at. So there's information for subcontracting. If there's some reason they need to be subcontractors allowed, we'll go through this document multiple times here for different solicitations. Successor vendor is not something that would be applicable to this. Where you're going to perform the services, well, you're delivering to a place in Illinois, so you would fill in Illinois or to the address provided in the solicitation. Format for pricing. So this is where you would see them enter if they're going to allow expenses, which is not very common in the state of Illinois. Same with discounts, not very common in the state of Illinois, based on payment terms. And then vendor's pricing, this will be filled in later once you submitted a bid. The term of the contract, again, is not negotiable. It is what it is. And then for some reason, if you wanted to negotiate the terms and conditions after the term of contract, these are the items that could potentially be negotiated. Some of them will not be negotiated. Some of them are the law, and there is no room for negotiation. Some of them may be negotiated. Just depends on what you're taking exception to. Obviously, the more exceptions you take to a contract, especially to the cookie cutter terms and conditions, the higher chance there is of us not being able to come to an agreement and us moving on to a new vendor. But as a vendor, you do have the right to take exception to these T's and C's. So that's a formalized document with the contract. That's the second document that you may see on a small purchase. The third one that you may see on a small purchase is called a basic ordering agreement. To use this basic ordering agreement, they would either have to give you better specifications in this document, or they are still going to have that request for quote document attached to the small purchase that they're asking you to respond to. Because as you can look, this is a very basic document. There's not any specifications here, right? There's nothing that says the traps must be 11 by 12 by 10 or whatever the exact specification was. There's nothing that tells you that they must have a dashboard or whatever it may be. So sometimes you'll see two documents in conjunction. You'll see the request for quote documents telling you what the specifications are going to look like. And you'll see this as your separate two-party signature document. So those two documents can work together, or they can do a contract. So like I said, there is no set way that the state does this. So I want to make sure you see them all. So this document has some of the same information that you would see on the other one, right? Here's your bid number. That's the bid number you're looking at in BidBuy. Here's the term dates. As a vendor, you could fill in your contact info. You'd fill in your contact information here. State's contact information would be here and here and here for bill to and ship to. And then as the vendor, you could resubmit this with your unit cost. So let's say you charge $100 or whatever it may be here in this line item. You're charging $50 per hour for training and $3 per unit for shipping. This is where you would fill that out. You would sign it as the vendor with someone with signature authority, and then you could submit this with your bid. However, filling this out does not take the place of actually doing the bid and BidBuy. We're just going to drop a screen here and go back into BidBuy. I'm going to go into BidBuy like I was a vendor responding to this solicitation. Your screen would look different when you're responding. I just have to get to the screen I can respond at. So as a vendor, you would have this create new quote screen. Filling out that BOA document does not substitute filling your pricing in BidBuy. If the state says they need their pricing filled in BidBuy, you have to fill the pricing in BidBuy. It is just the contractual document at the end of the thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to be a vendor here. And this is very similar to what we covered in the IFB class webinar. We're going to be Joe's Car Wash because that's a fake vendor that I know is in the system. So as Joe's Car Wash, we're going to bid on this thing. Receipt date's going to be right now. Yours would automatically fill that time in for you when you submitted it. Mine does not. I can put how many delivery days I'm expecting. So contract says must be delivered in 60 days. I say 30. That does not change the value of your bid. It's merely to show that you can have compliance. We're going to bid. Got a quote. If I needed to put my info in here for them to respond to me or ask me questions, I can do so. And then I would save this tab. It's going to tell me I didn't acknowledge the terms and conditions, which is fine. And I do all tabs in order. It's the easiest way, in my opinion. It's even what I do when I'm personally looking at bids coming from the other side. So we start the general tab, we finish that one. Now we're at the items tab. So items tab's where our pricing needs to go. So being a small purchase, it should not be very complicated. It should be pretty straightforward. What's my price for smart squirrel traps? Well, $1,000. My price for on-site training, $50 an hour, because they said they need 5 hours. And they give me the site. It's important to remember that there was no expenses involved. So your cost for on-site training must include your travel to that on-site training. So it's something to take into account whenever you're filling out one of these. Shipping cost, we'll make up a number, $3 a unit. Great. So I can save and continue this. And that's going to save my cost. It's going to tell me my total quote response down here is $50,000, $50,400. Much like we did in the IFB, if you had a bunch of items in here, so maybe they were buying a bunch of low dollar value items that didn't exceed the $100,000 threshold. They're buying a bunch of pens and pencils, nuts and bolts. And you got to bid on every single one of them. You could do just like we did on the IFB and export these line items. So you'd always export in CSV. It downloads a spreadsheet for you. Now I have a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet's going to match exactly what was in BidBuy for you. But if you had a bunch of items and needed to be able to price them out quickly, or you want to be able to copy and paste prices or a myriad of other things, you can just do it right here. So let's say I put the wrong cost in and I want to say these cost $900. And anything you put in this sheet and upload, it will overwrite whatever you put in there previously. So I'm just going to change the prices. I'm going to save it to my downloads folder. Say I had a bunch of items. Now I can upload that spreadsheet back in after I filled in all my pricing. Upload it from wherever you saved it, save and exit. It's going to tell you if you proceed, any items that are already on there is going to be replaced with whatever values you put in the spreadsheet. Now, if you look, my values have changed. Now my top is 900, my second one's 45, my third one's $2. So if you have a bunch of items, this is definitely the fastest way to do it, whether you're doing an IFB, a small purchase, an RFP. Item export and upload is a big time saver. So now we got pricing established there. The questions tab, the state does not use, so you won't see anything on there. The subcontractor tab, if you had a subcontractor, you can add them here. Same way you added yourself, you'd look up a vendor. Obviously, I'm using Joe's Car Wash, but if Joe's Car Wash was my subcontractor, I can look for them by vendor name, add them as a subcontractor. Or you can just fill out the subcontractor section of the contract if there's a contract attached. The terms and conditions, it makes you agree to these, but this does not mean that you're agreeing to the contractual terms and conditions. This is a piece of BidBuy that we can't get around here. So you still get to negotiate the contractual terms and conditions based on the contract set forth in the procurement. If you have files to attach, the attachments tab. If you're attaching a quote document, this is where you would attach it. But please note, just because you attach a quote document, it does not supersede the need to fill in the items tab. Preference documents not used. Reminders not used. Summary tab is going to tell you the things that you filled in. So here's my info contact. Here's my new quote total based on the upload sheet that I put in. Here's my quote price. It's going to give me the option to submit my quote. So now I would submit my quote. You'll have the option to print your quote at the end. For attachments, I guess I didn't touch on, this is where you would attach the contract file or the BOA or anything else that's attached that the state is asking you to return. So we submitted the quote. I do want to jump back into the bid real fast and go over a couple things that we didn't go over that you wouldn't see as a vendor, but they could be important to you. So being a small purchase, as I said, the first thing is we have to do this to small businesses. That does not mean there's a small business out there that can meet our needs. So if there's not a small business out there, the state has the opportunity to request a small business set-aside program waiver. And this is even if we went out to small businesses first and didn't get any bids, or there's a myriad of reasons. This is not a document that you would normally see, but I think it is important for you to know it's there. So if the state is not going to small businesses, that means they had to justify that there's a need for a name brand product that a small business can't provide. So maybe it is a proprietary product that only a large business provides. Or we solicited the small businesses already and didn't get any offers from the small businesses. The supply base for the product has large diversified vendors under BEP or better known. the product or the service, it's got to be purchased from ICI. For Do It, that is not something that we use. But there are some Illinois correctional industries items such as, and I believe it's like milk still, that the ICI, or mattresses or pillows that ICI still produces. There's an opportunity to establish no bid contract with the state use vendor. So state use is another program by the state that wouldn't require a formal bid or informal bid. They are a specified list of vendors. You have to qualify to be a state use vendor. There's information out there on how to become one of those. And the prices offered by the qualified small businesses are substantially greater than the estimated dollar value prior to the estimation of the dollar value prior to the solicitation being sent out. So what that means is an agency did their market research. They have a price at the market, but the prices that they were offered in a small business solicitation came back greatly higher than what that market research returned. They do have to justify that as an agency. It's got to be approved by their state purchasing officer, or depending on some other dollar value things, it could be by their agency purchasing officer, but procurement lead does not get to make that call on their own. They do have to justify that. So that's one thing that you may not see in the documents, but is a possibility to be going on in the background if you see that's not going to small businesses. The other one that you may not see, you'll see it on the general tab, but it's called a brand name justification. So if the state, for example, needed a specific item, so I created a fake one of these. And said we need Acme squirrel traps. If anyone ever watched Looney Tunes, I'm sure you saw how awesome all the Acme products are. They work wonderful. So if we needed Acme smart squirrel traps for some reason, we have to justify why only an Acme smart squirrel trap would work for the state. So, you know, obviously I made this one up. I said to ensure compatibility in an existing system. These traps are needed for their API interaction with Acme dynamite crates to keep the pesky coyotes away. We don't want the pesky coyotes eating the squirrels. So to use a brand name, we have to have a real good justification. If it's going to it's going to preserve the warranty, only a certified dealer can do this. We have millions of dollars invested in this specific program, and we just need to renew licenses for a specific program. But there's no way to disentangle those licenses from the 6 other programs they touch without costing the state a lot of money. So there's different, or the other one is to comply with the Department of Innovation and Communication or Information Technology standard. So as the agency of Department of Innovation and Technology, part of our role is to establish standard IT items for the 36 agencies that we cover. So once we create a standard item and create an enterprise item to be used by everyone, that would be another justification. So you wouldn't see this specific form, but do know that this form is a possibility. And if the state is asking for something brand name specific, it is because we just had to justify why we needed it. Where you would see it is on this general tab in the bid. There would be this little box right here that says brand name, yes or no. So when you looked at it, it would say this is a brand name item. The state would need to specify in their line items here. If it was brand name, it would need to say Acme squirrel traps part number XYZ. So they would need to specify exactly what they needed by that brand name. But that is a possibility for you guys to see too as well. The only other documents that would be attached to this bid, potentially standard Illinois certifications. These are required for all procurements under $100,000. If you have an IPG registration, your standard certifications are part of that registration already. If you don't have an IPG registration, you'll notice that these are the same certifications you would find on a contract or not on a contract, but on the vendor disclosures on a larger procurement. The only thing that gets filled out on standard certifications would be box number 30 saying you're registered with the Board of Elections. Registration with the Board of Elections is required for any procurement over $50,000. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that's the only thing that you fill out on this specific form. The other form you may potentially see on a small purchase is if they use an RFQ document and didn't use a contract or a BOA, they might attach their terms and the state's terms and conditions. There's two different terms and conditions in the state. There's standard terms and conditions for standard items. There's IT terms and conditions for IT items. So this version, I attach the IT terms and conditions because we're talking about dashboards and smart traps and API integrations. So that means there's going to be some data going over. So, but same here, as I mentioned in the contract, you have the ability to negotiate the terms and conditions. So if you want to negotiate the terms and conditions and this is the document they attached, you would just redline this document and return it with your bid. All right, so now we've submitted a bid. We've looked at the different documents. On the state side, what they're going to do, and this is exactly the screen the state side would see. Being a small business, a small purchase, it's 100% based on price. So they're going to first go through and make sure the quotes, so we only have one since we're Joe's Car Wash, but if there was multiple, they would go through the quotes, make sure they meet all basic things they had to do. So entering pricing, if you don't enter pricing, your quote may not be accepted. So they would check that. They would check that you meet the minimum specifications laid out in the procurement. And then they're going to go to the items tab and look for a price, right? It's a small purchase, so lowest price is going to win. Lowest price that meets the minimum specifications. The only other thing being a small purchase under $100,000, the only other thing that the state's really going to have to check is if you have any money owed to the state of Illinois. They go out to the comptroller's website or to the comptroller system. It's based on your FEIN number. If it comes back that you owe the state of Illinois money, there is a good potential that we cannot contract with you. You either have to be in a repayment plan and show that you're in a repayment plan, or you would have to pay the debt before we can enter into a contract. But being a small purchase, there's not a whole lot to the evaluation phase of this. They're going to check and make sure you meet the qualifications, that you entered your pricing, and that you don't owe the state money. And then they're going to award this thing. So 3, 5, 7 days, start to finish, from the time this touches the street to the time it's closed and awarded to a vendor. So important for being agile here. After the award of a small purchase, there would be a notification that goes out via BidBuy to the vendor that got the award. There is not a formal notice of award publication like there is on a IFB. Something else important to remember, there will not be a formal notification saying this vendor was awarded at this price. But here's the price of all the other vendors that bid. So that is not something you'll get on a small purchase. After this, the state would then move forward. We would negotiate any terms and conditions that had to be negotiated, get any licensing agreements, any service agreements, any of the other things that we would have to get to before we got an executed contract and a contract was finalized and signed. Once a contract was executed, we'd go back to the terms of the contract and make sure that delivery happened within 60 days, as stated in the contract, to make sure training happened within 30 days, as stated, 30 days of delivery, as stated in the contract. But as you can see, small purchases move really fast. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room to let me think about it. Let me come back and enter a price tomorrow, because tomorrow might be too late. I'm going to quit showing this screen and see if I can see any questions that I did not get to here before we do a quick dive off into something else.
There was a couple of questions, Chris. So one person asked, so states can bid to other states. Is that true?
The state would have to be set up as a vendor to bid on other states. I can't think of a situation where that would happen, but if the state
Oh.
was a vendor and the state created something to draw revenue and they were registered with the Secretary of State as a business in Illinois, or, I mean, it's not against any public rules that I could think of. They would just have to be a vendor. They can't
Okay.
bid as a state. They have to be registered as a vendor.
Also, so would this process apply for IT professional services for small purchases less than 100K in contract value? Or is this process only relevant with regards to sourcing items and materials?
This process is for the purchase of anything under $100,000. So it could be a license to a specific program. We need to buy 5 licenses and they're, a total of 10 grand. It could be we need pens or pencils. It could be I need a Toyota Corolla. So small purchase is a viable option as long as that cost does not exceed $100,000. It does not matter what the material is, what the item is, what the service is. What matters is the value of the procurement. Note also that that's if the state does not have a contract for that item, right? If we have a contract for specific licensing, that's a blanket contract. They would buy off that license before they go out to do a small purchase. So you're going to utilize your contracts in place before you go out to a small purchase if you have a blanket type contract.
Okay. Also, do we submit for all quotes under 100K through BidBuy, even the Illinois tollway?
Yes, anything between 20,000 and 100,000 will have been submitted through BidBuy. So that's where you'd be submitting those quotes through.
Okay.
Under 20,000,
how
we won't get into, but there are some different thresholds there. They still have to go out to small businesses, but they may not be in BidBuy. But everything between $20,000 and $100,000 will be in BidBuy.
Okay. Then how does a sub 100K purchase for IT work when the state has TOPS vendors?
So that gets back to what I was just talking about. If it is an item on a contract already, we wouldn't be coming out to do a small purchase for it. It's something that was on one of the JPMCs available to the state, and that JPMC can meet the state's needs, and those needs are germane to that contract. They would be utilizing that contract. So if we're talking in the vein of TOPS, if it's something on a TOPS contract, it's germane to the TOPS contract, the state would be coming to do a release from the TOPS contract before they come to do a small purchase in this method. This is for items that the state does not have a contractual relationship with already.
Okay. How do we re-engage if you have a license?
Just want to make sure I answer that right. So if you were an awarded vendor on a previous small purchase, there's no such thing as a renewal. The state has to go back out and rebid those licenses out unless there's a specific renewal written in. We cannot just go back to the same vendor because you won it last time. If it is over $20,000, it must be bid out between the $20,000 and $100,000. I kind of briefly mentioned anything under $20,000 technically should still be bid out, but you can go directly to any small business in state procurement and buy something under $20,000 as long as they are a small business. But in theory, the state wants to bid out all those things. So over $20,000 is required to bid out every single time, whether you have the license now or not. Under $20,000, the state may come back to the same vendor as long as they are a small business. But best practice would be for the state to still bid those items out to ensure that they are getting the best cost.
Okay, and we've got a couple requests for will a recording of the session be available? And yes, and we will put this on the Department of Innovation and Technology YouTube channel. I'll go ahead and post that YouTube channel in this chat so that everybody has that. And so we will be sending out a follow-up after today's session. Okay, we have another question, Chris. I would like to sell a chemical-free absorbent to the state and other industrial companies in the micro purchasing. How would I go about that if I don't see it on BidBuy?
There's not really a way for you to do that if you don't see it on BidBuy, right? BidBuy is the state's e-procurement platform. Most of the state's chemical purchases or chemical contracts are set up by the larger agencies. So they maybe have their own blanket contract because they're not going to come purchase every time, or it may be a master contract set up through another agency. The state doesn't do a whole lot of micro purchasing, as you would call it, depending on how you define micro purchasing, because that does not allow the state to leverage economies of scale. So it's not saying they couldn't do a bunch of smaller procurements, but once those procurements are consistent, they would have to go out to bid a solicitation regardless, because they would be stringing a bunch of smaller procurements together to meet a larger need. So eventually they would get back to having to do this method anyway, at the end of the day.
Okay. We have another one. Are small businesses encouraged to team if either can't fulfill the contract individually?
That's absolutely a possibility. The one thing to make sure is that the state checks that subcontracting is allowed. Especially if you're looking at a contract or a BOA document, it should be right on there. Tells you, yes, you can kind of subcontract out or you cannot subcontract out. The important thing to remember is if it is a small business set aside, you can only subcontract out to another small business. You couldn't be a small business and subcontract something out to a large business as a small business set aside, because obviously that would not be fair to the other small businesses. But if you do have subcontracts for stuff out, you also got to remember it's still based on lowest cost. So if it's costing you more to subcontract something out because you can't do it, state can't take that into consideration whenever we're evaluating. We still have to evaluate the low cost.
Okay. I have posted the channel for our YouTube where you can find Do It videos. And then also Bruce Montgomery has also posted some information if you need more info on the BEP program out in the chat for everyone as well. Chris, it looks like we're caught up with questions. Do you want me to share those last couple of slides that you wanted to address?
Yeah, absolutely. This will be a quick
Okay.
one. I think this has came up from a question in the invitation for bid session.
Okay, you should
So
see
this
that
is,
now.
yes, ma'am. So this is based on invitation for bid awards and bid amounts. So an invitation for bid, just like the small purchase that we just discussed, is solely based on cost and meeting the minimum specifications. But once there's an award announced for a invitation for bid, Do It gives the vendors 14 days to ask for all the pricing, because the pricing is publicly available. If you bid on a state bid, that pricing that you entered on that state bid is a publicly available information. So within 14 days, the lead on the procurement will provide that to you if you ask them for it. After 14 days, just because we have to have a window of disclosing, so the leads aren't coming back to this all the time, you would have to submit a FOIA request to get that, or any additional documents you want. So if you want to submit a FOIA request, you can go to doit.foia@illinois.gov. After the 14 days, they could request the pricing and any other documents. Prior to the 14 days, the lead will give you the pricing only. Let's go to the next one. And this last one, I think we had a couple links thrown in the chat, but this is additional plug for resources. Do It's YouTube page. This is a link right to the videos. The previous 3 sessions were vendor disclosures, Secretary of State, Board of Elections, and IDHR registrations, understanding and preparing a utilization plan, and cracking the code, responding to an invitation for bid. Those videos, along with this one, can all be found at that site. This video should be uploaded. I won't speak for Valerie, but whenever Valerie gets it done. So all these videos will be available along with any future videos. Also wanted to point out that the Chief Procurement Office for General Services, they also have resources for vendors available. They have what's called the Tuesday Afternoon Procurement Series. There's a link to their page there. The Tuesday Afternoon Procurement Series so far has covered financial disclosures, IPG, procurement methods, and BidBuy. If you see that cpo.general.illinois page there, that is the CPO's website's page. That will take you right to here, which quickly will give you access to their videos. If my screen, not showing, I'm still in your screen though. So that'll take you to here. It says their video, some additional information. And for anyone interested in the small business program, there is a tab down here for small business set aside program. Do It does not control that, but this is somewhere you can go to begin that process. Can you please share some agencies can help to get BEP certification besides Apex? So Reggie, you want to take that question? This is BEP related.
If you have any questions regarding BEP certification, you're welcome to call me, or you can also contact CEI at cei.illinois.gov, but definitely give me a contact. My email address is reginald.lampkin@illinois.gov, and I'm happy to, if I can't answer the question, I will definitely find out for you where you can procure that information. Hope all is well. And thank you, Chris, for your help today. Is there any other questions?
Bruce Montgomery's been sharing a lot of helpful information out in the chat, so everyone make sure that you scroll through that. He just now posted something about Training Tuesdays, so I'm sure that these are very helpful as well, and that is a WebEx link, something that you can join.
The last one I see is, can I access this recording afterwards? So as we mentioned, this will be available on Do It's YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and search for the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology, all these videos will be available. We have to give us some time to get this last one posted, but the previous ones are already posted.